Well, I've been around here, I guess, for 26 years, and as I mentioned at the meeting the other day of that I came here from my brother-in-law's advice. He had been involved in some of the early formation of the organization, and I sort of came here with the idea that, well, I'll give it a try, but there are other things I want to do also when I'm retired. And what's happened is it's taken over my life. But there are a number of things that I've really felt have been particularly interesting over these many years and that have been valuable to me. One is that I have built some good relationships with other ESC volunteers. And these are people who have great background, great experiences themselves in their careers, and who, like I, felt the time has come to give back. I retired at age 62.
Oh, wow.
And my friends said, "Why aren't you still working?" And I said, "I am working, but I'm working for a different purpose at this point." And so that's what I did at that time. And I had other ideas of starting a nonprofit and so on, but this seemed to be what I wanted to do. So one is building the relationship, but equally important to me is building relationships with the clients themselves. And I've formed some good friendships with clients. One, for example, is a mental health organization called Recovery International, and my first job with them was to help them develop some training of some of their leadership staff. But we ended up working with them for over a dozen years, and finally our last job was to find them an interim executive director, and lo and behold, the person we put into the job decided to stay there. And she's the executive director full time. And I ended up on their board of directors, and I really feel that I connected with their mission. I feel that there are too many people with mental and emotional disorders who are not getting support. And this is a self-help group similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, but for people with mental and emotional disorders. So I developed friends there, but I also ended up subscribing to their mission. And to me, that has been an important part of my whole life experience at ESC, is to connect with the mission of our clients. I have one that I'm about to bring on. It's an organization up in North Chicago that teaches young people who are having trouble getting into careers how to be cooks and chefs. And the woman who's running it is so committed and is such a bright, energetic person. She's so committed to helping these young people become successful in their careers, starting out by learning how to cook under the guidance of a chef. And they need board development, they need strategic planning, they need everything ESC has to offer, and we'll get some business from them. Another value to me in this whole ESC experience has been the opportunity to continue to grow personally. I've developed skills that I didn't have before. I learned about the nonprofit sector and their needs, and gained an understanding of how to make them successful. I had done a little strategic planning in my own career with my own company, but boy, I learned it in depth at ESC, because you got to know it if you're going to consult in it. Presentation skills. I never had the opportunity to do a lot of presentations, but every time I have a client, I'm doing presentations. Meeting facilitation skills to get groups together, and I'm still doing that in my life here at Lake Forest Place, but I learned it at ESC. And then training. Although I was in the training business, I had never conducted training, myself. But at ESC, I learned how to do it, and I'm still, although I was instrumental in starting the training function here, I'm still doing it 26 years later. I don't know why I'm still doing it. As I'm thinking about what has changed at ESC over the years, one is the relationships with corporations. ESC really started through the initiative of a number of corporate leaders, chief executives of major companies, and they wanted a place to put their retired executives. But as it turned out, our relationships with corporations kind of changed as the corporate entities changed. Initially, we had AT&T, Chicago region. We had Inland Steel, and a whole number of major corporations. All the big banks and so on were tied into ESC. That's changed. Those corporations have moved out of town, so our relationship has changed. Originally, they found us volunteers, they helped us with funding, and they helped us in our own governance. We selected a number of them to be kind of advisors to us. Well, so that involvement with corporations has changed over the years, but it means that we have new challenges and new opportunities for relationships. I'm thinking now then of what are the challenges that are facing ESC, and there are a number of them, as in any organization. Interestingly, I sold my company about 28 years ago, and but it remained, and it got smaller, and then it moved to a different location and so on. This morning I went on Google to see how they were doing, and they don't exist anymore, which makes me mad. They didn't listen to me 28 years ago. But anyway, we faced some challenges, largely due to the fact that the world around us is changing so rapidly. You know, I've always been interested in the comment that Jack Welch, the head of General Electric, said many years ago, that if the rate of change outside of your organization exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is in sight. And we're in such a fast-changing environment that we've got to change too. So I think one of our challenges is to change with the environment that we're in a number of areas. One is our competition has changed. We have more competition from individual consultants who can do this part-time. There's a lot of pro bono consulting going on, and funding from different sources. Clients in many cases can't afford our services, so we have to look for ways that we can lower our costs, as you've done very well, so that we can provide these volunteer services in competition with others who do it free. I think that the major change, though, that's been on my mind is technology. Although I got my MBA in 1957, so things have changed a little since then, but they change every day, and the people who join ESC this year are going to be a little obsolete next year when you think of the rate of change going on. So that is a major factor in thinking of us for the future. So there's changes in technology. There's my field was marketing, and now with the use of social media, that whole field of marketing is changing in accounting systems, and certainly in the fundraising area, the whole approach to raising money is changing a lot. So these are, on the one hand, threats to ESC, but also opportunities, and we have to find ways to change with it. I think there are two opportunities that are in my mind that we ought to be looking at. One is the opportunity to partner with younger people who are in the workforce, who are part of the fast-moving change. We need to be with them, not looking at them. And so I think that opportunity exists. And another is partnering with consulting firms who are keeping up to date, who are causing the change. You know, Deloitte and Booz Allen and these companies are only looking for big clients. They wouldn't be interested at all in these under $1 million clients that we serve. But maybe there's a way we could partner with them. So I think the whole idea of partnering with people other than ourselves is something really to look at, because we'll never be up to date. Things are, once you're out of the workforce, out of the process of fast-moving change, you've got to find ways to deliver services other than through our through our obsolete knowledge base. So I think that is an opportunity that exists. I don't see any reason why ESC can't be part of networks of organizations, connecting with industry associations, playing a role with United Ways and others who are in the midst of responding to all this change. And so we ought to think about our organization in the future as being involved with those who are at the forefront of change, not those who are just responding to it. But we also shouldn't forget that the one quality that doesn't change is judgment. And the fact that we've all run organizations, run departments, have been played major roles in working with companies and nonprofits as well, has given us experience which has formed judgment, and I believe that is something that we still bring to the party.
Do you mind if I ask a few questions?
No.
Okay, so you said your brother-in-law got you originally interested in Executive Service Corps. Who was that?
How did he get it?
Yeah, what's his name?
Bob Greenebaum.
Okay.
He's the father of one of our board members.
Yes, right? I've seen lots of photos of him.
Yeah, he retired at 62 from Inland Steel Company.
So he also retired young.
Yeah.
Was it common back then?
Pardon?
Was that common at the time?
Not particularly. People kept, although today people are working in their 80s. Mm-hmm. Then by the time they were 65, it was considered normal to close shop. And in his case, there was an opportunity for him to take early retirement, so he came a little early. He was treasurer of this big steel company. In my case, I was at a point where I wanted to sell my company. Mm-hmm. And so I found an opportunity to do it, to sell it to a group of employees. And so, although I wasn't retiring from life or from careers, I was retiring from my day-to-day work.
That's great. And when you came to ESC, you were coming on the recommendation of a family member who went from being treasurer of Inland Steel to being treasurer of the Executive Service Corps of Chicago. Yeah. And you thought, I'll have a chance to continue to use my expertise and volunteer. When you first came to ESC, what was the organization like? Well,
it was big. I think we had 15 full-time staff people. Initially, we were in the 25 East Washington building, and then shortly after, Inland Steel gave us some...
You're popular.
Inland Steel gave us some space to use in their building, and so we moved into this fancy facility. And then after that, we moved back into But so we're very staff dependent. Dennis Zavak, who was the founding executive director, was well known in the community. And but as I say, we were much more connected at the corporate level. Chicago Community Trust funded ESC at the beginning, and they became our major link to the nonprofit field. And but other than that, it was bringing people in who were newly retired and finding ways to give back.
And has there been any projects that stand out to you in your mind over your years at ESC that were particularly meaningful or interesting for you?
Well, what I think, unlike perhaps others at ESC, I became much more engaged in the companies that we were working with than just doing the projects. And I still am that way. I might be on a board development project, but I'm more interested in also seeing how the various departments operate, who their competition is. I mentioned recovery, and this would be an example. I found in looking at their total situation that they were very dependent on government money out of Washington. So I asked the executive director, I said, who are these people in Washington who are bringing the money in? And she didn't know particularly because it came from Washington to the states and down to the cities. And I said, well, I think we ought to go to Washington. What? Yeah, I said, let's make it and go to Washington and find out. So I called my senator and I said, can you set up, I knew that the Veterans Administration was an important ingredient in the mental health field. And I said, so I asked him, I said, can you make an appointment with me at the VA? And so when the senator calls the VA, they answer the phone. And sure enough, he was able to get an appointment for us there. So we flew to Washington and met with the head of psychiatric services for the entire Veterans Administration, found out exactly how things operated, where the money flowed from, and as a result, in this case recovery, was able to tap into some of that money. Well, I don't know whether many of us over the years have gone out of the Chicago area, but a lot of our clients are national organizations, and why shouldn't we be followed? So I looked at my relationship at ESC as one is trying to understand the businesses themselves, who their competition is, what opportunities are there for collaboration, and it took more time to do a project perhaps, but I thought that we were able to be more helpful to them. So I think that but it, also it's frustrating because a lot of these organizations were not well run. What was interesting in the early days is most of the executive directors were people experienced in the mission of the organization. They didn't have a business experience. They didn't have a lot of experience in the financial area or marketing. So they depended us to bring in some of that expertise. But over the years, it's changed, and a lot of executive directors have MBAs like you and I do. Well, that was unheard of back in the days when I started. There were no MBAs running charities, so that's changed over the years. So now they're not looking to us for quite the same level of, quote, business expertise, but more expertise in moving their organization forward and dealing with the competition and dealing with staff and building that. So our judgment from our experience is important to them, but they're not really looking as much for business experience itself. It's more organizational and managing. How do you appropriately terminate an employee? You know, a lot of them haven't never done that. So that's changed over the years.
So just going back to you taking this trip with your client to DC, one of the things that's really surprised me in getting to know so many of our engagement managers is how many of them do things like that, where they go way above and beyond what any consultant would normally do. I'm thinking about an engagement manager who worked on a project that required her to purchase a car for the project, which she then used to get to and from the project every day. And when the project was over, she sold the car. It's really an incredible thing. I'm wondering where the passion for the work comes from. Is it from seeing the results, or getting to learn new things, or the colleagues you work with? Where does the passion come from that makes it so that you want to do those things, and you're going far beyond the scope of a typical nonprofit
I'll
consultant?
give you an example. One of my first projects was with a school in Chicago, the Crane Technical High School, and the principal of the school asked the ESC to come in and kind of coach him on a couple of things. I don't even recall the specific issue. But as I got into it, I found out that they had a real security problem at that high school. They were right in the most difficult area of the city. One of our volunteers on the project actually had his car broken into.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't all that comfortable necessarily. But nevertheless, the problem I found very quickly was that there were 3 different police forces in the area. One served the hospitals on the west side, one the city police force, and then the school one. And the kids came to school at 8 in the morning, but unfortunately 8 in the morning is when the school police department had their meeting every morning. So they weren't in the school when the kids were arriving.
That seems like a very bad strategy.
And then the housing developments down the street, they had some security people, but they never walked out of the housing development. So these kids were crossing over, and there were drive-by shootings going on.
Oh, no.
So I guess my first thought is, let's get these different police forces together and figure out what are we going to do at 8 in the morning when these kids are here. Well, the principal was not, he thought it was a great idea. He might have thought of, he didn't think he could pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
I said, of course you can pull it off.
I can sympathize with that feeling.
Yeah. How do you pull it off? You pull it off, you call the bosses of these things, and you tell them, here's the problem, and I want you to come to a meeting at the school, and let's figure out how to arrange it. I didn't know anything about police security or anything like that, but it doesn't take rocket science. You know, that's one of the values of an outsider, looking in and finding issues that you can dig your heart. All the experiences were not successful. You know, we're engaged for a period of time, and I tended to stay with the client longer than our contract called for.
And why was that?
Because I wanted to see it through,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have been willing to pay for a strategic plan, but they weren't going to pay for ESC hanging in for the next year. But the plan's not going to work unless we make it
Follow
work.
through, yeah.
Follow through. So there are certain projects that I've gotten involved with that I got very interested in beyond the ESC project, and one has to do with climate change. My son is involved in that field and dealing with global warming issues, and actually I was able to get a engagement from his company, his nonprofit in Los Angeles, and we've got a team together to do a strategic plan. But
And how did that go?
It went well. We had a team. 3 of us went to Los Angeles and facilitated a retreat, and we developed the plan. But when it was over with, I wasn't over with it. Maybe it was because my son was involved, but I wanted to stay with it. So when he left his company, I started working with the person who replaced him. She happens to be here in Chicago, and so she engaged me to do coaching because she had never run an organization before. I've been doing some executive coaching of her. Now she's looking to merge the organization with a Washington, D.C. thing, and I don't know whether ESC will get a contract to do to help them with the merger, but I'm still involved, and I'm always a little embarrassed when we turn in our hours. Should I be putting in hours where I'm doing it without a contract, or
yes.
Yes.
I presume that's a rhetorical question, but I'm going to answer and say yes.
Yeah. So I'm still involved, but at the moment we finished the contract, the coaching was done, and I'm still hanging in because I got, just as in the mental health field, I got personally excited about what they're doing, and just because the contract's over, I'm still interested in it.
And it's an important cause.
I have a possibility I'm thinking of right now of a project right here at Lake Forest Place. I've organized a marketing task force here, and to help because we're getting a lot of competition, and some of these cottages are getting vacant, and I'm thinking there are some issues relating to the governance of this organization, and how it relates to the Presbyterian Homes that owns a couple of other retirement communities. I'm thinking, hey, let's get ESC involved here. Why should I be giving my time away?
That's great. I like that.
So that, there's so many opportunities.
Oh, that's true.
I hope I brought up earlier the issue of change, and we have to be very receptive to change, and I don't feel that we always are. I think that the situations that our clients are in, the economics of our business and so on, tend to prevent us perhaps from getting into areas that need our help. So I think we ought to relook at our mission to some extent and see if there are some ways that we can connect in certain fields perhaps that have a particular need. I don't think our business necessarily has to be limited to the scope of particular 501c3 companies. I think that we should be looking at industries. If, for example, we were interested in this whole climate change issue, which is very challenging now, we should ask ourselves, what can we do in that whole area? Who do we need to talk to see how we can build some expertise and find a way to find our way in to that field, not just because we happen to get a phone call that somebody needs a project from us. And I think that would be very gratifying to a lot of the volunteers if they're interested in religious issues or whatever nonprofits out there. Doesn't necessarily mean that we start with a project. It might be just
being proactive.
Maybe we get some funded research to figure out where their needs really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of this climate change area as perhaps that. It's a very fast-moving field. The government gets in and out of it. The world is not going to wait for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking, what could we be doing in that field, short of having a specific contract to do a piece of work?
Mm-hmm. So what are your favorite types of projects? Strategic planning, board development, coaching, business plan. Which thing have you found to be the most enjoyable to do?
Mine happens to be strategic planning. That's where I started. My kids keep telling me, Dad, we don't have to have a strategic plan about ourselves. But
Are you providing unsolicited consulting to your children?
Yeah. Oh yeah, more than they ask for. I'm thinking but what I'm finding now, and I'm glad ESC is moving this way, is the projects don't necessarily have a defined wall around them. We know that to be successful with this, implementing a strategic plan, you have to have a strong board, and you have to have fund development, and so the trending I see us going to is these multi-functional projects. And this project I'm starting to get into now with this agency that teaches young people to become chefs, they need strategic planning, board development, and fund development. And she's coming here to meet with me next Wednesday, and I'm not going to try to sell one or the other. I want to sell her a consulting engagement to help in all three of those areas. I'm not a good cook, so I can't help her in that area. But she's sort of stuck with a very small organization with a great mission, and it's going to take more than one. So it's all going to happen sort of simultaneously, and I'm looking forward to figuring out how to make that happen. But I, in terms of my preference now, it is sort of looking at the multifaceted part of it. Here at Lake Forest Place, I saw a need for marketing help, and I've started that. But in the process, I found that healthcare has some interesting issues relating to it. And people who move here have health issues often, or they ultimately will. So how is the healthcare facility here operating, and how do we carry that message to potential residents here? And what role do we residents play in helping build that part of the organization? So it's not singular at all, it's multifaceted, and that's sort of the way life is today.
That's true. Yeah, I think it's very hard for a nonprofit to be successful at anything without a good board of directors, because they're so much of the engine of an organization.
Yeah. And it's all about people and relationships. In my business, I felt my strength was building relationships with the clients.
I could certainly say that's been what I've observed.
And in so doing, I got involved in areas well beyond the particular engagement that my company was involved with. And as a result, I still have friends who were former clients. My largest client was a company out in Los Angeles area in the consumer finance industry, and I still see him every year, and we haven't had a project, I haven't done work for him probably for 20 years, but we're still friends. And interestingly, across the street is a woman who's the wife of the head of another one of my clients. He has Alzheimer's. She's still, so the client was Household Finance, which is a consumer finance company. They were one of my first largest clients. And she lives across the street from me.
It's a small world, especially in Chicago.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everybody. So as you think about the future of ESC, we're wrapping up our 40th year. What do you see coming in the next 40 years? You mentioned just trying to stay on top of change and technology and partnering with multi-generational teams. Are there other things you see that might happen in the next 40 years, or is there advice you have for me and your other colleagues at ESC over the next 4 decades?
Well, I think that goes back to a comment I made a couple minutes ago, that I believe that that we have to look beyond our traditional client relationships and think about where are there broader needs within the economy or within society that we should build some expertise in. I would like to do more than be just a facilitator. I think that we should look for opportunities to build some expertise. Much of it we already have. I mean, people all came from someplace, but I think we should take our blinders off and think about one or two or maybe three areas that ESC could become very prominent in. I think that's what major consulting firms have done. In banking, for example, there are certain consulting companies that sort of own the banking industry. My little company, Universal Training Systems, had that position in the consumer finance field. And by knowing their business, knowing their challenges, we can find many ways to help them. It's good from a marketing standpoint. And I frankly don't think we've been very good at that. I became very interested in the mental health field, but years ago I found that other engagement managers were taking projects in that field that I was sort of the expert in. And it was because they were up for another project or something. And I didn't think ESC really was paying attention to this need of building a knowledge base and an experience base. And I occasionally would bring it up as an issue. Why are you giving new projects in the area that I already have the experience in?
So you think more dynamic staffing that helps people build an expertise in a specific sector of the nonprofit or in a specific project type?
Yeah. So now that you know that I'm interested in climate change issues, I'd be willing to take on any project in that area. But you have to be, you have to know that. Yeah. You have to know that and be set up to do it. And if I happen to be busy that month, maybe we get to the client and put them off for a month and let John get into it. So I'm thinking that's one area. And the other is this area of being able to go beyond the individual engagement and look for areas that we should be able to make a difference in and invest in it. We've got plenty of volunteer time available, so if you decided that you want to get us into some particular area, retirement communities which are springing up all over the world, and you think, hey, there must be opportunities for this, let's create our own project to figure out what their needs are, how to get into it, and then find some business in that, rather than waiting for the phone to ring. And I think that this could be an interesting challenge of the board and the staff and the volunteer leadership to figure out where do we want to go in the next 3 or 4 years in terms of industries or areas of expertise, and then build teams to get into it and find our way into it rather than being just reactive. And I think we would be much more successful in overcoming competition, because in my experience, as I say, in the consumer finance field, no one else could get in because we had the experience, and our prices were probably higher than other people. And I'm thinking here, for example, if we were interested in mental health, for example, heck, let's figure out what that business is all about, what the needs are, and then start to look for some business in that area. So that's kind of the thought that I have.
That's great. Are there any colleagues that you have worked with over the years where you've worked with them over and over again? Maybe they're go-to team members that you like to recruit onto your projects, and how has your working relationship with them affected your involvement in ESC?
Relationship with the client?
With your ESC colleagues?
Oh, with the ESC colleagues. You know, I don't think it's that we were set up for that. I have had numerous projects in given areas, but I haven't necessarily, I guess it might be my fault, because if I asked Teresa, would you let me bring in Muriel Lederer in this project? She said, of course. And so I did that, but it wasn't related necessarily to the kind of project, but more just somebody I'm used to working with. And I think that, so what we need to think about in the future is, if we do want to pursue certain areas, then we want to build continuity, build some expertise, and then draw people into that area. And I think we'll find people that, my background is marketing, so I tended to look for marketing projects. And there were some people like Jeff and Muriel and others who were marketing people who I tried to connect with, but it was more happenstance. It wasn't programmed to do that. So I think we would have to look at our own database of people who have worked in certain areas and see if we can connect them together. And I could see even having, take for example, mental health. If we looked into our database and found everybody who's done projects on mental health and bring them together and figure out how do we build our practice in that area, and keep some continuity of relationships going, the same people in it, I think that would again give us an advantage over just picking whoever happens to be looking for a job. So it's a different way of looking at it, but again, I think that's what professional organizations do. Law firms, my brother-in-law was a lawyer in the banking field, and he always got the banking projects, you know, assignments. And it makes sense, because it's a knowledge, we're in a knowledge business.
Yeah.
So I think that's a challenge for you, figuring out how to staff it. I also think, just to wind up on this point, that if we decided that there are 3 different fields, let's say, that we want to build success in, we should look for board members in those fields, or maybe put together an advisory board. Let's say if mental health were the thing, let's put together a small advisory board of outsiders to help us get into that field.
Right.
And so we should figure out, where do we want to go in the future relating to the needs in the world and the market, and then how do we organize to those needs. I think that could give us a whole different value to the business than just figuring out who's next in line to carry the bag.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now we're ending our 40th year and going into next year. Are there any projects that you are looking forward to working on in the near or distant future?
I'm sorry, I was checking the time.
Oh, sorry, am I keeping you?
No,
I'm notoriously long-winded.
I have another half hour,
Okay.
but say it again.
Oh, sure. I was asking if there are any upcoming projects that you're looking forward to.
Well, the United Way of Lake County would be an example of how I think. I was engaged to do a coaching job there, and the person who I was coaching was a bright young marketing person, and I had a year's worth of coaching with her, and then about halfway through it they gave me another person to coach who's introducing a project that's called 211. It's like 911. You dial 911 and you get an emergency response. 211 gives you a social worker who directs you to an agency to help you with your child who needs help or
So it's
any
like-
human service issues.
So it's like a customer service line for humanity.
Yeah, exactly. So my client, that's her responsibility to get it started. My appointment in an hour is with the executive director of the United Way of Lake County. And they're gonna launch 211 this coming spring, probably
It's exciting.
in April. And we're gonna talk about how to market it, to get the whole county engaged in it. And so I had suggested to my coaching client that they form an advisory board. And lo and behold, they did, and I'm on it. And you're not paying me to do that.
No, I'm not.
And so today, her executive director wants to meet with us to talk about how are we going to do the launch of this project.
That's exciting.
For marketing. And so I'm hoping that they engage us to help them in that area. The problem is that much of their marketing now is going into social media, which I'm not expert in, so I'll have to pretend that you are. And so I'm staying with them.
Okay, good.
And we'll figure out where to carry it next, and out of it'll, I'm sure, come another engagement. I like this coaching kind of thing. It goes beyond what the client expects, because the last one I coached ended up leaving the organization, and I sort of facilitated that, but the client doesn't know that.
Yeah, let's not repeat that. We don't want them thinking that we're going to build someone's confidence to the point that they find a better job.
And the one I'm dealing with now, she needs a raise, salary raise. So our confidentiality agreement isn't all positive for the client. So I'm liking this United Way unit up here, and they're going through much change. Instead of just giving money to agencies, they're now actually delivering the services, and I'm hoping that ESC might be able to get involved in helping them figure out how to deliver those services and how to get them financed and so on. So this could be a long-term client. I worked with recovery for 12 years in the mental health field, and that's the kind of engagement I like, where it's not just a task, but you get in and you understand the client and you help them to the next stage and the next stage.
Okay, one final question. Do you have any advice for your ESC colleagues?
I guess my advice is essentially what I've been talking about. Look at the client as a long-term opportunity. Get to know the client, get to know what makes them tick, find ways to make them better, and the jobs will come. And I don't think that that's really built into our business model. A client calls in and
they say we need help, and we put someone to help them. Yeah.
And it gets back to my thought that perhaps what we should be doing is deciding what clients we want, not which ones happen to ring our doorbell, and
going the other direction. Yeah.
And figure out how to get it. And we have enough resources in terms of volunteers, I think, to do that. So I'm hopeful. I'll be 90 years old in 3 months.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, I'm not there yet. But fortunately, ESC has kept me going and has kept the brain alive, I guess. And so at this stage, I'm hopeful I can be of help at ESC in kind of redirecting emphasis to what we've been talking about. I think the world needs it. I think and so I think our whole approach to marketing should be directed this way as well. Figure out where we want to market, what kinds of services that we want to support, and buy our way into it in some fashion, maybe with volunteer help. And I'm hopeful I could help in that regard. I've got a couple, of experiences doing it, and I'm here.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for your many, many, many years of service to ESC and your generous support of it over the years. You have helped us recruit some of our best board members, our best consultants, in addition to all the services you've provided those consultants. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to give you a hug.